English lesson, we'll read an advanced news article together. And as we read the article, you'll learn advanced English vocabulary in context. You'll learn the correct grammar and the correct pronunciation at the same time. This article discusses the recent jewel heist at the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. If you can understand this article, your English is excellent. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started.
Our headline, suspects arrested over jewel heist from Paris's Louvre. Let's first talk about this word. Do you know what this means? Heist. Heist. So a heist is like a theft or a robbery, but it sounds like it was very well planned, and the goal was to get in and out without being detected. Whereas with a robbery or a theft, you picture someone going into a bank or store and saying, "Give me all your money." They're not trying to be undetected. But with a heist, they don't want anyone to see them or even to know it happened. The word heist, theft, and robbery, they're all nouns. Listen to this sentence. He robbed the bank, or he robbed his neighbor, because you can rob a person or you can rob a company, an institution, a location. So in this case, the verb is to rob, and here it's conjugated in the past simple. Now you can say she stole the money. She stole his car. So you steal something. You steal something from a location such as the bank or your neighbor's house, for example. So here the verb is steal, conjugated in the past is an irregular verb, stole. And here the word jewel, it tells you what type of heist. So was it a car heist, a painting heist? It was a jewel heist. And notice here, suspects arrested. But what type of sentence is this? Because the suspects are not doing the action. The police arrested suspects. The suspects are receiving the action. So this is the passive voice, but in headlines, they normally leave out articles and auxiliary verbs. And in this case, the auxiliary verb, suspects were arrested. So to be arrested, but it's past simple and is conjugated with they, suspects, plural. Suspects were arrested. Don't worry about taking these notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's keep reading and learn about this jewel heist. 2 suspects have been arrested. Okay, so here it's still the passive voice. They're using the present perfect form rather than the past simple form. Suspects were arrested. You could equally say have been arrested to show that connection to the present. There's a result in the present. So now they know who stole the jewels, or so now they will be prosecuted, whatever that result in the present is. But now that we're in the actual article, not the headline, they'll use full grammatical structures, including auxiliary verbs and articles. 2 suspects have been arrested over the theft of precious crown jewels from Paris's Louvre Museum, French media say. Now notice here, they changed it to the word theft instead of heist. There's really no reason why. They do mean the same thing. Yes, the word heist gives a certain image, the one I explained to you, where it's they go in undetected. It was very well planned, whereas theft just sounds less descriptive of that. But ultimately, the result is the same. They took something that did not belong to them over the theft of precious crown jewels from Paris's Louvre Museum, French media say. If we take this sentence, which is in the passive voice, and we turn it into the active voice, using the subject, the police, you would say the police have arrested 2 suspects. And then you could use this exact information without changing it at all. So you only need to change that first part, and you would still use the present perfect voice because here they use that verb tense just in the passive voice, and this is the active. Now notice here the police, this is a collective noun, but is conjugated as plural. So native speakers say the police have arrested, even though you don't see an S on here, and you will not because it's a collective noun. Now, as a plural noun with the verb to be, you would say the police are coming. Oh no, the police are coming. Finish the robbery, or whatever it might be.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
The Paris prosecutor's office. So here, prosecutor, this is the lawyer that represents the government. So the office, this is just the official term for the lawyer that represents the government. The Paris prosecutor's office said one of the men, so in this case men, you could replace this with one of the suspects, one of the men had been taken into custody. So if you're taken into custody, so notice here we have the verb take. In this case, is conjugated in the past perfect, had been taken into custody. But the collocation is to take someone into custody. So the police took him into custody. That's another way of saying that this man was officially arrested by the police. So we're taking you into custody, we're arresting you. Taken into custody as he was preparing to take a flight from Charles de Gaulle Airport. So this is the international airport in Paris. So here you have the past perfect passive voice, which is not the most commonly used. Now, to take this and change it into the active voice, again, using our subject, the police, you can say the police had taken the suspect or the man into custody, because you, in the active form, you take someone into custody. So you need to specify the someone. So you can replace the word the man with the suspect, just to give more information. He's a man who is officially accused of committing a crime. Suspect. The police had taken the suspect into custody. And then you can continue on with the rest of the sentence as is. Items worth 88 million euros or $102 million US dollars were taken. So again, notice there's a lot of use of the passive voice because they're focusing on the action, not who did the action. So just they want to focus on the fact that items were taken, not that the man or the thieves took the items. So items worth 88 million euros were taken from the world's most visited museum last Sunday. So articles generally do this. Instead of just using the same word again and again, like Louvre, they can use a different way of describing it. So give more information about the museum, but in a very natural way, such as using it as an adjective. The world's most visited museum. So because this is a superlative form, we need the article the world's most visited museum last Sunday when 4 thieves, so now we have more information because 2 men were taken into custody, were arrested, but when 4 thieves, so they know there were 4 in total. Notice the pronunciation here, thieves, because the singular is one thief, it ends in the F, thief, and then the irregular plural, thieves. So let's look at these different forms. There was a theft. So a theft is a noun. There was one thief. So a thief is a person who steals money. And a theft is referring to the incident, the event. When you get home and you realize that your car is gone, you would call the police and say there was a theft. I think there was one thief, one person. Or I think there were, because it's plural, 4 thieves, 4 people who stole. So notice there is no verb form for the noun theft. You change it to the verb steal. And we already learned that the irregular past simple, the thieves stole the jewels or my car, whatever it might be. When 4 thieves wielding power tools. This is interesting because there's an expression to wield power, but now they're saying to wield power tools. So tools like a hammer, a saw, but a power tool is a saw that is connected to a power source. So it can become a chainsaw. So you hear the noise rather than just a non-power saw, or a non-power chainsaw, which is a regular saw. So if you wield a power tool, it simply means you use that power tool. So they use these power tools to break into the building. But there's a different expression, which is why I paused when I read this, because I saw wield power. Because there's an expression, if you wield power, it simply means that you have power or influence or authority and then you use it. So it's the same thing, you use the power tools, but there is an expression to wield power, which just means to use your influence or your authority, the power that you have. And notice the pronunciation of this word. It's just like the word wheel, like the wheel on a bus goes round and round. And then you just add the D, of course, because the word ends in a D. Wield, but a softy. Wield, wielding, wield, wielding. When 4 thieves wielding power tools broke into the building in broad daylight. So here they're adding the word broad daylight to mean complete daylight. And they're adding this to make you realize that these thieves stole jewels from the most visited museum in broad daylight. They didn't even wait for dark when most criminal activity takes place, in our minds at least. So in broad daylight. You could absolutely just say in daylight, but broad makes it sound more dramatic. So if you say, I slept in until broad daylight, you imagine maybe it's 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. when the sun is at its absolute brightest. You might say, I can't believe my bike was stolen. So this is the passive voice because it focuses on just the action, not who did the action, because you don't know. My bike was stolen in broad daylight when everyone is out and it's very easy to be seen in broad daylight. Let's keep going. France's justice minister has conceded security protocols failed. So if you concede something, it's like you admit it. So of course, an official, a government official does not want to say publicly that their security protocols failed. So that's why they use the verb has conceded rather than just has said, because it sounds more defeatist. She conceded. Leaving the country with a terrible image. So of course, the image of one's country, when you think of France, rather than the Eiffel Tower and delicious pastries, you might think of this. And so you have a different image now. One of the suspects was preparing to travel to Algeria. Police sources have told French media. So a source is someone who provides provides information to the police, but they do it anonymously, which means they don't reveal their identity. You may hear this from journalists. Journalists may have an inside source. So someone within a company shares information but they don't want the journalist to say this information came from them, so it's anonymous. Police sources have told French media, while it is understood the other was going to Mali. This is an interesting way of saying it. It is understood the other was going to Mali. I don't think that's the most common phrasing. They're just saying that based on the information, they know that the other person, or maybe they suspect, maybe they don't know for certain, but they have a good idea, or that's probably why they use the word understanding. So based on the information, but perhaps they can't say this with certainty, which is why they used this phrasing to add some doubt to it. A more everyday way of saying it would be while they, because the subject would be the police. And remember, I said it's conjugated as they, while they think the other was going to Mali. That would be a more everyday, common way of saying it. It's certainly how I would express it in spoken English or written English as well. Specialist police can detain and question them for up to 96 hours. Okay, so detain, if the police detain you, it means you must stay at the police station. You're not allowed to leave. So maybe you're not officially arrested, but you cannot just walk up and say, oh, I'm tired, I'm bored, I'm going home. You can't do that because you're being detained. But they can only do this for a maximum period of time to protect these people's rights. So for up to, that is the maximum. So you could say for a maximum of 96 hours. But you can say absolutely up to is an excellent way of saying it. It's a very common way of saying it. So I recommend you add that to your vocabulary. Of course, up to, because it's a maximum, is commonly used in deadlines. So you can say you have up to 3 days to submit the budget. So a maximum of, but of course you can submit it earlier. And coming back to detain, I just thought of another way this would be commonly used. Of course, it is most commonly used with police, but if you're going through an airport and for some reason, something about your visa or your passport doesn't seem right, the customs officials or the airport officials can detain you. So they can force you or require you to stay in the airport until they resolve it. So it can be used in a broader context, but is more commonly used with the police. According to reports in French media on Sunday, DNA found at the scene of the robbery. Oh, you probably hear this in movies a lot. At the scene of the crime. Well, a robbery is a type of crime. And since we know that this was a robbery, it makes sense that they replaced the word crime with robbery, but you could absolutely use crime. So robbery is a type of crime, but there are other crimes as well. DNA found at the scene of the robbery led to the identification of one of the suspects. So here we have something, the DNA, led to something else, the identification of one of the suspects. So the identification of, it means that they were able to identify, meaning your name is. So they were able to identify because they didn't know who the thieves were previously. So here, something leads to something. The verb is lead, but this is the past simple led. This is a great sentence structure. You can say learning English with the news, what you're doing now, leads to increased fluency. So results in, you can think of it instead of leads to, you could use results in, but notice that preposition, because in this case, we need the preposition to. This is part of the expression. X leads to Y. Now I have leads because X is one thing. So it would be a singular thing. If you had two things, then it would be lead because it's they. So here I have one thing, learning English with the news. You could say studying every day leads to increased fluency. So this is Y, one thing. It could also be two things as well. And then this is your verb. So you can think of this also as leads to or results in, but notice that that preposition is different, and then you have to conjugate your verb as well. So if you agree that learning English with the news, what you're doing right now, leads to increased fluency, hopefully you agree with that, or you can change this to whatever you want. Put that's right, put that's right in the comments. I certainly think it's a great method. Hopefully you do as well. So put that's right in the comments so I know you do. And let's keep reading. The gang left behind. So here, you could replace this with the group, but gang sounds negative. It's a group of people who are conspiring or committing crime. So that's why they use the gang instead of the group, because remember, there were 4 thieves. At least that's what the article said. The gang left behind a number of items. So maybe they left behind a number of items at the scene of the crime, the scene of the robbery, which of course is the museum. So these items are still at the museum. And the items are including gloves and a high visibility jacket. So those are the items. The Louvre has transferred some of its most precious jewels. Repeat after me, precious. Precious. So the spelling and pronunciation don't look the same. Precious. Shh. We have an SH sound. Shis. Shis. Precious. Precious. Maybe you know this word from The Lord of the Rings. Most precious jewels to the Bank of France. So this is a location. Bank of France. It's the name of the bank. And I know that because it's capitalized. And if I see a word like bank, which normally wouldn't be capitalized, I understand that it's the official name. So it's a proper noun, and that's why it's capitalized. Following the heist. So in this case, following the heist, it means after the heist. So this is, instead of saying after the class, make sure you download the PDF. I can say following the class, make sure you download the PDF. So it sounds a little more advanced. They will now be stored. So they represents the jewels because that's our plural subject now. They will now be stored. So if you store something, it means you keep it in a location. So someone could ask you, oh, where do you store your old photo albums? Where do you keep them? So the jewels will now be stored in the bank's most secure vault. So this B is capitalized because it represents the name, the Bank of France. So they're just shortening it to the bank. The bank's most secure vault, 26 meters or 85 feet below the ground floor. So if it's below the ground floor, you could say underground. Underground, 26 meters underground, 85 feet underground, below the ground floor of its elegant headquarters in central Paris. So this is where the main office for the bank is, the Bank of France. The headquarters is the main office. Experts have also expressed concern that the jewels may have already been broken up into hundreds of pieces. So you would take this one jewel, maybe it's a crown, and you break it up. So you could smash it with a hammer, or you could just do this to it. And so instead of one item, you see all of these jewels in your hand. That would be broken up into hundreds of pieces. So that's what this into is, the preposition use. And this also is the passive voice because they're not talking about who's doing the action. They're just talking about the jewels receiving the action. But they're using the word may. And they're also using express concerns. So this means that they haven't said it definitively with certainty, and may is just for a possibility. So it's certainly possible that this hasn't happened. And then it is still a beautiful crown that will be returned to the museum. That is still a possibility at the time of this article. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish, and you can focus on my pronunciation. Suspects arrested over jewel heist from Paris's Louvre. 2 suspects have been arrested over the theft of precious crown jewels from Paris's Louvre Museum, French media say. The Paris prosecutor's office said one of the men had been taken into custody as he was preparing to take a flight from Charles de Gaulle Airport. Items worth 88 million euros, 102 million US dollars, were taken from the world's most visited museum last Sunday when 4 thieves wielding power tools broke into the building in broad daylight. France's justice minister had conceded security protocols failed, leaving the country with a terrible image. One of the suspects was preparing to travel to Algeria, police sources have told French media, while it is understood the other was going to Mali. Specialist police can detain and question them for up to 96 hours. According to reports in French media on Sunday, DNA found at the scene of the robbery led to the identification of one of the suspects. The gang left behind a number of items, including gloves and a high-visibility jacket. The Louvre has transferred some of its most precious jewels to the Bank of France following the heist. They will now be stored in the bank's most secure vault, 26 meters, 85 feet below the ground floor of its elegant headquarters in central Paris. Experts have also expressed concern that the jewels may have already been broken up into hundreds of pieces.
Amazing job! Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put yes, put yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.